the 21st of December 1988, a brown Samsonite suitcase was loaded onto PanAm Flight 103. Inside the case was a bomb. At 7:03 p.m. that night, it exploded over the Scottish town of Lockerbie. 259 passengers and crew and 11 local residents were killed. It is still the worst terrorist atrocity ever to have taken place on British soil. Although Libyan Abdelbasit al-Megrahi was convicted of the crime in 2001 and sentenced to life in prison, his family continues to appeal the verdict. In this film, we remember the atrocity and recall the tragedy of that night through the personal stories of survivors and victims' families, some of whom have never spoken before. A phone call is received at the US Embassy in Finland, warning of a terrorist plot against a Pan American Airlines flight to the US, sometime within the next 2 weeks. It's passed on to the Federal Aviation Authority, but ultimately dismissed as a hoax. Who made the bomb that blew Pan Am Flight 103 out of the air, and who placed it on board, is still disputed 30 years later. What we do know is that the bomb was made of 450 grams of Semtex plastic explosive attached to a timer. The bomb was then placed inside a Toshiba radio cassette player. The cassette player was placed inside a brown suitcase. In West London, Kim Wickham is packing. She's one of a large group of American students from Syracuse University who have been studying in London for a term. She has never shared her story before.
It was an awesome group of people. We traveled to Paris, we traveled to Holland, we traveled to Italy. And then we also did the typical tourism things, you know, Madame Tussauds and, you know, things like that that normal British people don't do. We had so much fun, so much fun.
After packing, Kim goes to see her close friend, Nicole Boulanger.
It wasn't all that far away. It was maybe like a 10 or 15-minute walk from Notting Hill Gate down Portobello Road, hang a left.
Nicole is studying acting and singing. She's looking forward to returning to America to see her parents.
I bought her a Christmas ornament that she had been looking for her mom. She didn't realize that I bought it, so I surprised her with it. Gave her a big hug and, you know, said, I wish you Merry Christmas, love you, my friend, and big hug. And then, you know, I had to get going because I had to get to Heathrow. Get back to my flat and get my stuff.
December the 21st is one of the busiest traveling days of the year. Staff are dealing with the pre-Christmas rush. Out on the tarmac, a Pan Am Jumbo 747 has just arrived from San Francisco. After refueling, it will make its next flight to New York this evening at 6 p.m. renamed PanAm Flight 103. Before this happens, the brown suitcase will find its way into the cargo hold. In West London, Jaswant Basuta is exhausted. He's been in the UK visiting relatives. He also speaks here for the first time.
I had not seen my people for like 4 years from that time. So I went to see everybody here, dinner here, party here, party there. Then finally, I decided to go back to the United States.
Jaswant is returning home to his wife and children in New Jersey. He's anxious about getting to the airport and has arranged a lift with his brother-in-law.
I was looking for a very reliable person who could reach me airport in time, because I have missed a flight before this flight once. So I told my brother-in-law, please pick me up at this time, sharp, so take me to the Heathrow.
Also scheduled to fly back to New York that evening on Flight 103 is actress Kim Cattrall, who's in London working on a feature film, The Return of the Musketeers. It's 10 years before Sex and the City fame, but her film career is already going well. In order to fit in a last-minute shopping trip, she changed her flight, booking one scheduled to depart just 45 minutes later. At her home in Nantwich, Cheshire, Anne Mann is making last-minute Christmas preparations.
Well, all our family were at home, of course. I was in the choir at church, so we had a carol service that night.
In the past, Anne has spent Christmas with her younger brother, John.
I think my dad thought he was a hippie in a way, because he used to say, I wish you'd get your hair cut. Because he got married with long hair. Well, longish hair, you know.
John Stevenson is married to his childhood sweetheart, Geraldine, and they have 2 children, Hannah, 10, and Rachel, 8.
You couldn't have had a nicer family. You couldn't. They were the most loving family. John loved the children. Geraldine was exactly the same. They both worked hard, because Geraldine was a teacher.
But this year, John isn't spending Christmas with Anne. He and his family are on their way to Heathrow for a holiday.
They were going to stay with Geraldine's sister in Boston for Christmas. They cashed in their air miles so the whole family could go.
At Terminal 3, the check-in desks are now open. Flight 103 is due to depart for JFK in New York in 3.5 hours' time. The Boeing 747 has capacity for over 400 passengers. But although it's only 4 days to Christmas, it's less than 2/3 full. Pleased to have got a last-minute ticket is 22-year-old medical student Flora Swire.
She'd come home for the weekend before, and she had stayed for lunch on Sunday. And on the Monday, she'd rung up, and I knew she wanted to go. She said, well, I've managed to get a flight, and we're going to fly on the 21st.
An outstanding student, Flora has been awarded a postgraduate place at Cambridge. She's decided to surprise her parents with the news when she gets back.
Apart from being very clever, she was also loaded with common sense. She was terrific fun. I remember when 2 of her friends came up for a bit of vacation there, and they were all dancing in synchrony in the middle of the floor. The whole sitting room floor was going up and down underneath their pounding feet. But she really enjoyed life.
Flora is going to spend Christmas with her boyfriend at Harvard.
It's difficult to conduct a romance with one side of the Atlantic and one the other. So he'd come over in October, and 2 months later it was her turn to go back to see him. I mean, she just chose randomly that flight, PanAm 103.
Passengers for PanAm Flight 103 have started to check in. 2 days earlier, the British Transport Department wrote to airlines at Heathrow, warning of a bomb being concealed in a Toshiba radio cassette player. The letter was not received by PanAm until 3.5 weeks later. In West London, Jaswant is still waiting for his brother-in-law, who is stuck in Christmas traffic.
She said, I will be there in time. But I waited, 10 minutes late he came. I said, what you are doing? You want me to miss the flight again today? He said, no, I was just stuck in a traffic.
Jaswant's London relatives tried to persuade him to stay for Christmas.
They were insisting, just change your mind. I said, no.
Another passenger yet to leave for the airport is John Lydon. A decade after becoming famous as Johnny Rotten, lead singer of the Sex Pistols, he is now married and packing with his wife Nora for a holiday in the States. But she takes too long and the couple argue. Unable to pack on time, they cancel the flight and book on one the next day. In air traffic control, Richard Dawson is 3 hours into his shift.
You would control for approximately an hour and a half and then have a half an hour fatigue break. And then when you returned, you would return to a different controlling position. I found myself in the air departure controller's position for the departure of Pan American, as we call it, Clipper 103.
Just how and when the brown suitcase arrives at Heathrow is disputed. But the airport security system fails to detect the bomb concealed inside. Passengers are now passing through security. 43 of them are British, including 19-year-old Ellie Ivel, who works at a dog's home in Windsor.
The Kennels had a Christmas party about 3 or 4 days before the 21st of December. And that's when this picture was taken. This is the only photograph I had, really, of her looking sort of more glamorous and more grown up.
Christina is planning to meet Ellie in New York the following day.
We were invited to go to my friends in New York. We didn't have any money, so we went as couriers. You take documents over, and they pay most of your fare. But we couldn't travel together. The courier company refused, and we tossed a coin. Who's going to go first? I remember in the kitchen we tossed the coin, and she won.
At John F. Kennedy Airport, Pan Am staff have begun to arrive for work. Linda Freyer is a former flight attendant, now working as a crew supervisor.
There's something in airline people, and it's called wanderlust. It's kind of like fairy dust is spread out on all of us, and we love the travel, we love meeting people, we love experiencing new cultures, and so you're always looking for that next trip to go someplace and see something new.
Pan Am Flight 103 from London is due to land at around 8 p.m. local time.
It was a kind of a normal day. We're getting ready for holidays. We'd had a great holiday party the weekend before for everybody in the office. So it was kind of a upbeat mood, and people were happy, and it was a nice day.
"300 miles north of Heathrow, beneath the transatlantic flight path, is the small Scottish town of Lockerbie.
Christmas time, I think, is quite quiet. We have our lights that are switched on. We have Christmas decorations up, and you have a little glass of wine or some little beverage of some sort, and mince pies.
Marion is at the Lockerbie ice rink. She's waiting for her 9-year-old son, David. He plays in the junior curling team.
David would have walked across from school, which was just adjacent to the ice rink. And it's just something that is so accessible for children, to walk across. And then I met him and had his shoes and his money ready for him to play his game and to get his training that evening.
Most of the 243 passengers for PanAm Flight 103 have now checked in. The group of American students from Syracuse University are heading for Gate 14. They include Ken Bissett, who has just celebrated an important birthday.
He was originally going to go home on the 19th and then decided he wanted to celebrate his 21st birthday with his friends.
Ken is Kim Wickham's flatmate.
I loved Ken. He was very old soul, kind of. I remember he'd just sit there with his leg crossed, smoking his cigarette, and he was very thoughtful, very educated. He loved to read. Ken wanted to be a writer.
His mother, Carol, was just 19 and unmarried when she gave birth.
Since it was 1967 and my father was principal of the high school, being an unwed mother in that town would have been extremely difficult. I decided that I would give the baby up for adoption.
Ken is heading home to spend Christmas with his adoptive parents. He will have a window seat, number 31J. Another member of the group, Kim Wickham's close friend Nico Boulanger, is in seat 28B. Kim was also at Heathrow, but had changed her plans at the last moment.
I had been speaking with my girlfriends in Germany, and their mother said to me at one point, Kimmy, you must come for Christmas. So I called my parents, and my father and my mother, I don't think were happy with me at all. They said, no, you're gonna come home on the flight. And I really don't know what happened, but all of a sudden I'm at the PanAm office, and I took a deep breath and walked up to the lady, and I changed my flight and went to Germany.
Jaswant Basuta has finally arrived at the check-in, along with several family members who have turned up to say goodbye.
I checked in my luggage. There were so many members of the family came to see me off. I went out. Her brother, he said, listen, we still have time. You must have a beer with me. Me, my brother-in-law from Cardiff, our brother, so many people, we went to the bar. So I'm having a Carlsberg Special Brew. Filled it again.
As Jaswant downs his third pint, passengers are beginning to board the plane. Ellie Ivel, who is traveling to New York as a courier, one day ahead of her mother, sits in aisle seat 19C. Flora Swire, who is visiting her boyfriend at Harvard, is towards the back of the plane in 39D. And the Stevenson family, John, Geraldine, and their 2 children, Rachel and Hannah, are in the middle, in seats 22D and 22G.
On that evening, the weather was particularly poor. It was wet, it was windy, and it wasn't at all nice, basically. On our flight progress strips, which give us the information on individual aircraft, from memory, I believe the aircraft was running late.
Out on the tarmac, baggage handlers are loading the last pieces of luggage aboard PanAm 103. By now, the brown suitcase has been placed in the hold. Whether by chance or design, it's at the bottom of the cargo container. Here, it will cause the greatest impact when it explodes. In air traffic control, Richard Dawson has 2 hours left on his shift.
I was the air departure controller that evening for runway 27 right, which is the northerly runway of the 2 parallel runways that we have at Heathrow.
On PanAm 103, the brown Samsonite suitcase is now stored in the hold. There's one passenger who's not yet on the flight. Jaswant Basuta is still drinking with relatives in the airport bar. Suddenly, he sees the time.
I said, I'm going to go. I hugged everybody. Bye. Went to my father-in-law, my sisters, I hugged them. I'm going.
Jaswant has just minutes to reach gate 14.
When I reached the gate, one guy said, if you are catching one of 3, you're not going to make up, just run. So I jumped out, I started running. Run when I reached the gate. Don't have to show the passport, just go. I went, they locked the door.
Jaswant misses the plane by a matter of seconds. But his suitcase is on board.
The aircraft Clipper 103 first came into my eyesight over my left-hand shoulder.
26 after 125, the whole ran up.
As they entered the runway, they opened the throttles on the 4 engines and accelerated down the runway and became airborne. And the words "good night" were exchanged between us.
The flight is 25 minutes late. On board are 243 passengers and 159 empty seats. One of them would have been occupied by American student Kim Wickham. She's now with her friends in Germany.
I arrived, and I remember sitting at the table and having dinner. We had dinner. I remember looking at my watch a lot. I have no idea why.
Kim's close friend Nicole Boulanger is on the plane. The friends are both studying music at Syracuse University.
She was just one of the brightest lights and best people I ever met in my life, and she just inspired me so much.
Nicole is on her way home to spend Christmas with her parents and plans to meet up with Kim after the holiday. As Flight 103 begins its ascent, it is handed over to Robin Hill.
The logic of the route is based on the weather circumstances. Either the aircraft will go out via Land's End, through Wales, or through Scotland. And on this particular day, the most advantageous winds were via Scotland. Pure chance to do with the meteorological situation at the time.
On board 103 are 16 crew, including newly qualified flight attendant Jocelyn Rayner.
On her 10th birthday, I asked her, what do you want to be when you grow up? And she said, a stewardess. I remember when she graduated, and I got permission to pin her wings on her, which made me very proud that my daughter won her wings.
As a new recruit, Jocelyn is hoping to be promoted to the first class cabin.
PanAm did have the best first class service at the time. It was an 8-cart service. Much of the first-class service on PanAm had been developed in the 60s, and it was developed in concert with Maxime's of Paris.
Flight 103 has now been in the air for 7 minutes. Robin Hill hands over to Midland's air traffic control.
I put him on a direct track to Pole Hill, and I just said, cheerio, have a good trip. And that was the last of my conversation with him. They were happy in the cockpit, obviously going home for Christmas, and everything was going smoothly.
The flight path will take the plane directly over Lockerbie, where David Murdoch has now finished on the ice.
David had his little bit of training and a wee game. After having had our dinner in the cafe, it was time to get David back home to bed.
The captain has now switched off the fasten seatbelt sign.
10 minutes into the flight, the crew begin the in-flight service.
The flight attendants would have gotten out of their seats at 10,000 feet. They would have gone to their respective work positions. The galley attendants would have been checking all the food preparation, counting, making sure they had sufficient proportions.
Jocelyn Rayner is a regular on the transatlantic service.
After she graduated, she volunteered to go to London to be based there because of Shakespeare and all. She was very much into Shakespeare. So I remember her calling and saying, wow, I got to see Stratford-on-Avon. And she was really in her element. She says, when I'm flying, I've got a captive audience. And so she fit right in.
The flight is now crossing the Scottish border, full of fuel for the transatlantic crossing. Marion Murdoch and her son David have set off for home from the Lockerbie ice rink. Their route will take them directly beneath PanAm 103. They're now serving drinks in economy.
You had your basic mixers, your vodka, your gin tonics. We had little bottles of champagne. You know, pina coladas were pretty popular.
Just after 7 o'clock, air traffic control begins transmitting clearance for PanAm 103 to head out over the Atlantic.
Shanwick clears the Clipper 103 to Kennedy, 59 north, 10 west, 62 north.
They receive no reply. The bomb in the radio cassette player detonates. Six miles below, the explosion cannot be heard. But as the plane disintegrates, the 4 engines are still running. Marion and her son, David Murdoch, are now directly below the falling wreckage.
This noise was getting louder and louder and louder, and I was almost screaming at Mum to speed up the car.
I really was panicking and trying to hold on to the steering wheel and wonder, what on earth is this happening?
It was just so loud.
So loud. A really, really deep, deep loud noise.
The 2 wings and the middle part of the fuselage, containing 90 tons of aviation fuel, fall 31,000 feet onto a residential street in the south of Lockerbie, narrowly missing the car of Marion Murdoch and her son David.
We heard the impact, and it was almost like the car was like jumping off the road.
Yeah.
And I'd actually turned round at this point and literally could see almost like the Hiroshima type bomb, the mushroom type cloud, and that was just pillowing up into the sky.
Reports from other planes in the area immediately reach air traffic control.
The pilots just reported a fireball. That's all they'd seen, a fireball in the Scottish borders area. It was a very clear night. It was a winter's night, very dark, so you can see a fireball from miles away.
I think they thought immediately it was the petrol station had actually blown up, and that's where we've seen the big explosion.
One of the first emergency workers to enter Sherwood Crescent, where the wings have landed, is off-duty police constable Robert Togneri.
My first thoughts were that perhaps a tanker had crashed on the dual carriageway. I told my wife that I was going to see what had happened. There were major fires ongoing. There was debris all along the streets. I spoke to one resident, and there were a number of parts of bodies lying about his garden and driveway.
I had a hand put on my shoulder by another controller to relieve me from my position, which was out of sequence. So I said to him, actually, it's not my turn, it's somebody else's turn to be relieved. And he said, yes, but we've gone into the distress phase for Pan American 103, and I'm relieving you from your position so you can go and write a report. It was just one of those feelings of, oh my God, you know, what on earth has happened here? What on earth has happened?
At Terminal 3, police are searching for one passenger whose suitcase was on Flight 103, although he was not.
I'm just sitting there by myself, cursing myself, and the two cops came to me. Are you so-and-so? Yes. Where were you flying to? I say, to United States, New York. Do you know what happened to that flight you were flying? I said, I don't know, sir. I don't know what the hell happened to it. I know I miss it. I used the same words. He said that flight crashed in Scotland. I wouldn't believe him. Then they said, you have to come with us to the Heathrow police station and explain us how did you miss it.
In New York, the flight's destination, PanAm crew manager Linda Frere is on duty.
I was talking to one of my colleagues, and the phone was ringing, and she sat down and picked up the phone, and I could see her whole demeanor just change. And then she hung up the phone, and she looked at me and she said, 103 is not on radar anymore. It fell off radar. So we went from a very happy group that day to probably one of the worst days of our lives.
An hour and 20 minutes after the bomb exploded, Jane Swire, mother of medical student Flora, is at home.
All I remember was that a flash came sort of onto the television that evening.
A Pan American 747 jumbo jet with 258 people on board has crashed 15 miles north of the Scottish border.
Of course, hope against hope that maybe there were several flights to New York at that time. But, I mean, like all parents, you sort of have a terrible sixth sense that this was it, that this could have been her flight.
There are no details of casualties yet. We'll bring you more details on News at 10.
Ellie Ivel's mother, Christina, is also watching TV.
It was on the news, and I knew straight away it was that plane. I don't know why, I just knew.
Police discover the cockpit of the jumbo in a field 3 miles east of Lockerbie. The question now is, are there any lives to save? Specialist rescue workers are arriving to help search for survivors. Among them, David Wally.
I was a young man, 35, probably at my prime, the mountain rescue team leader of RAF Lookers. Well, I got a police escort myself to the M74. The motorway was shut, and you could see the fires and the smoke in the distance. So it was a scene from hell when I got there. Remember, this happened in a rural area with the smallest police force in the UK, smallest fire service, smallest ambulance service.
David puts on a head torch to do a reconnaissance of the town and surrounding fields.
There was bodies everywhere. This was a battlefield. I was away for about 45 minutes. I ran round by myself. This was not what we were used to. Remember, I'd nearly 20 years' experience of aircraft crashes. I'd never seen this amount of young people and children and Christmas presents. There was Christmas presents everywhere. So it was surreal, the whole thing was. And the fires and the darkness. There was people in gardens. There was people hanging from the roofs.
American student Kim Wickham has just had dinner with her friends in Germany. She's decided at the last moment not to travel with her flatmate Ken and her close friend Nicole.
I was washing my face and I heard the phone ring and I was like, geez, that's weird. And so I walked over to it and I picked it up. It was my grandmother. And she's like, Kim, is that you, Kim? And she's all like, sounding a little off. And I'm like, yeah, Grandma, what are you calling? It's the middle of the night. So she proceeded to tell me that my plane crashed. And just give me 1 second. So my grandmother, told me what happened. And so I woke up my girlfriend Claudia, and she quickly woke her parents up, and we turned the TV on, and flames everywhere. We saw flames everywhere. I thought, oh my God, Ken. Oh my God, Nicole.
Nicole's mother is on her way to collect her from the airport.
We were so excited. I had done baking, I had decorated the house and did all the cleaning, and I was just going to be looking forward to hearing from her all of the wonderful things that she had experienced that semester.
As relatives arrive, PanAm crew manager Linda Freya is at the terminal building.
By the time I got up there, a lot of the family members from the Syracuse University students had started to assemble. And they were being taken aside because they were taken up to the Clipper Club to be kept away from the photos, the pictures, and everything that was going on. And they were being told of the accident. One mother that I'll never forget, because she collapsed pretty much in front of me, in front of the podium, upon seeing information about the flight. It just never leaves you. It's just there. And you just didn't know what to do or what to say.
The hard part of recalling that was that I couldn't move. I had tripods between my legs. I had visual people in my face with flashes and lights. And it felt like forever. I'm sure it was only a short time. And people helped me up. And that was the beginning of our nightmare.
2.5 hours after the crash, police open a temporary mortuary at the town hall. 18-year-old local police constable Colin Dorrance is on duty there.
A farmer drew up with a pickup truck, and the farmer had collected some debris which had landed in his farmyard, and we unloaded the pickup truck. This took us a few moments, but then I became aware that there was someone in the passenger seat. I had assumed that this was a young, grandson or a son of his that he couldn't leave alone in the farm or something like that. But it turned out he'd picked up this young child who was from the plane, wrapped him in a coat, and the child looked, at first glance uninjured, and just asleep. The young child was the first to arrive into the town hall. It was just such a stark moment.
It's obviously still too early to put a precise figure on the number of dead and injured, but indications so far suggest that there were no survivors from the aircraft. The number of ground casualties is still being assessed.
In Cheshire, Anne Mann doesn't know if her brother and his family were on the flight.
I spoke to Heathrow and they said they would ring us back. They wouldn't, obviously hadn't got all the passenger list, they didn't know etc. then, but they would ring us back, and they rang us in the early hours of the morning, 2 or 3 in the morning, to say yes, they were on.
Flora Swire's parents are also trying to get news about their daughter.
Well, obviously we couldn't sleep. Jim kept trying to get through to PanAm to confirm that was her flight, and eventually he did, in about 2 o'clock in the morning. I can't describe the shock, the disbelief, the grief. It is just a terrible emotion that is impossible to come to terms with. I mean, it was the most devastating experience of our lives.
You could see ambulances, nose to tail, parked and unattended, or not being used. And that told the story that this was an all or nothing thing. You were either dead and gone, or you were physically unscathed by it. It seemed to be very much all or nothing.
Seven hours after PanAm 103 exploded over the Scottish town of Lockerbie, the search for answers has already begun.
There are 3 main reasons why the plane may have crashed. One was that there was some kind of catastrophic failure, another was collision, and the third possibility was that it was a terrorist attack.
At Heathrow, police are interrogating their first suspect. Jaswant Basuta missed the flight by just 1 minute and has been detained by police for questioning.
So they took me to the Heathrow police station, which was a very, very long interrogation, and they couldn't find anything. They said, tonight you have to stay here. I say, I'm not going to stay here tonight. Why should I stay? What did I do wrong?
He's under suspicion because although he wasn't on the flight, his suitcase was.
Maybe a lot of people must be thinking somebody didn't get on the plane and his luggage was on the plane. Could be a person. It was their duty. It was their job to make sure.
Jaswant's wife in New Jersey has no idea that he didn't get on the plane. American student Kim Wickham, who didn't fly with her group as planned, is desperately trying to find out what happened to them.
I contacted PanAm on the phone I pretended I was Nicole's sister because I didn't think that they would give me information if I was just like, someone who wasn't related to somebody. So, I just verified certain people, I guess, on the plane, and they did tell me. And I think it was pretty clear that there were no survivors, and they were thinking it was, terrorism or something, but we really didn't know.
With first light in Lockerbie, the world finally sees the enormous scale of the devastation. Flight 103 had been traveling at 500 miles an hour and at 31,000 feet. With the strong winds, debris was dispersed from Lockerbie almost 100 miles to the North Sea. Teams spread out in the critical search for evidence. David Wally is leading a team from Fife, drafted in to help locate bodies and to search for the plane's black box.
We were marking fatalities all the way through. So the three team leaders from my teams were there, and we were working together, and every 2 hours the guys would come back, have a break, because we only wanted them out for 2 hours at a time. It was too much. And if you think in the first few hours we located 160 bodies, that is incredible. We were saying body, 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 sadly, and it's a horrible way to say it, but when you're talking about nearly 300 casualties in the end, it was way out of our remit.
It was the job of the police and the military to bring the bodies into Lockerbie.
I felt really sorry for the young soldiers that were coming in. A lot of them, I don't know what ages they were, 17, 18, 19. They didn't have the life experience that I had.
Now, because the guys in the teams in the RAF teams, a lot of them are engineers, we know where the black box should be. And they found that at first light. At 6:30, I think they found it. And they brought it straight in, and that went away to get checked.
While they wait to hear if the black box holds any clues, each one of the bodies from the plane has to be photographed and its location recorded before it can be moved.
Our guys were putting jackets and things over the people. A, to give them dignity, and B, because they'd seen once, and once is enough.
In Bromsgrove, Jane and Jim Swire are waiting to hear if their daughter Flora's body has been found.
It was an absolute nightmare. You have to somehow try and carry on. We had to try and manage to scrape together some meals and just try and hold on together as a family.
Ellie Ivel's mother, Christina, is also waiting to find out if they've located her daughter's body.
I was not in a fit state to think clearly, but people kept on phoning me, asking me, was she on that plane? A girlfriend of mine came straight over from Kent to be with me, and my GP came over. They all heard.
Press helicopters circling the town reveal the devastation at Sherwood Crescent made by the impact of the wing section of the plane. Three houses in the street have been totally obliterated by the blast. 12 local residents are currently unaccounted for. Police officer Colin Dorrance was sent to a second crash site at Park Place.
Clearly a large part of the plane had hit a house, and there was this surreal image of a house being ripped away like a doll's house. The furniture still in it, and you could see right into this bedroom on the first floor. Fortunately, the resident who was in the house was retrieved relatively unscathed from the back door. It's a miracle that no one in Park Place sustained severe injury.
Within hours of recovering the plane's black box, police have already studied its recordings.
The black box showed that there was no evidence of mechanical or structural failure, and that, of course, was further evidence that it was a terrorist attack and not a catastrophic failure of the aircraft.
Unbeknownst to investigators, somewhere amongst the 290 tons of wreckage are fragments of the radio cassette player and the brown suitcase. At Heathrow police station, Jaswant Basuta is released after initial questioning. One of the officers calls his wife, but she refuses to believe he is alive.
She said, I know everything what you're trying to tell me. He was in the flight, he crashed, I've called my father, he said, yes, he was in the flight, so he's dead. She wouldn't believe still, because her father has confirmed he was in the plane. So everybody confirmed my death.
With no suspect and no evidence of mechanical failure on the plane, the focus on recovering vital evidence from the crash scene intensifies.
I think the primary difficulty for the police was just the sheer scale of the crash site. This was the biggest loss of life that there had been since the Second World War. They had a crash site that was hundreds of square miles. They were faced with what was a huge and very, very difficult job.
One of the most harrowing tasks fell to Robert Togneri.
We had a job to do, which entailed taking each set of remains out of the coffins, cleaning them off. They were being x-rayed to see, obviously, if there were fragments within them that could be of evidential value. There was a girl brought out, a little bit older than my daughter, and I walked away from that one. And I just had to let someone else deal with that. And that was it. We did our job.
A map locating where each passenger fell is created by the search teams. Stewardess Jocelyn Rayner's body is discovered by a farmer.
We found out that my daughter's body was in a pasture, a dairy farm with cattle and sheep. And he said the next morning, hers was the first body he saw lying there in a fetal position. And they had little flags and markers for the investigators, I guess, to identify where the remains were all over his farm.
John Stevenson and his two daughters, Rachel and Hannah, are discovered in a field 3 miles from the town.
John was found by the wall at Tundergar, and the girls were behind that further up the hill in 2 separate places.
Three days after the crash, police make a vital discovery.
2 police dog handlers found a piece of blackened and twisted aluminium which appeared to show signs of explosive damage.
It has been established that 2 parts of the metal luggage pallet's framework show conclusive evidence of a detonating high explosive. The explosive's residues recovered from the debris have been positively identified and are consistent with the use of a high-performance fast explosive.
1 week after the bombing, it is officially confirmed that PanAm 103 was destroyed by an act of terrorism.
You didn't think that someone wanted to blow a plane out of the sky. It just seemed like something so horrible that it wasn't conceivable in someone's mind to blow themselves up, conceivably, and or a plane full of innocent people.
In Lockerbie, the task of recovering and identifying the bodies of 270 victims is ongoing. Those that can be recovered are brought to temporary mortuaries in the town.
There was a large series of whiteboards, and these whiteboards were numbered to match the coffins. A name of a person, a country of origin. And it's standing there and looking at that, the sheer scale of it, the sheer loss of life, hits you. You know, and you really do ask yourself, why?
Ellie Ivel's mother, Christina, is also waiting to find out if they've located her daughter's body.
You're in a daze, really, because there's so much to think of. You're waiting for a body to bury, and then you get sort of interviewed by this strange Secret Service personnel who want to know why we were traveling, and I said, well, she had hand luggage. But, you know, they drilled me.
Investigators suspect the bomb was concealed in a suitcase and are working to match every bag found in the wreckage to a passenger on the flight. Having been allowed to return home to New Jersey, Jaswant Basuta receives a visit from the FBI.
The FBI start coming there, a lady and a man. They used to come, talk to me. They used to come with all different kind of photographs. They said, we are trying to get the suitcases, whom they belong to.
Eventually, Jaswant identifies his suitcase. Satisfied his bag had not contained the bomb, he is eliminated from inquiries. In Lockerbie, the search for evidence continues, but the process of releasing bodies to the families has begun. Flora Swire's body was found on the town's golf course, along with 43 others.
I didn't want to see her body, partly because I knew it would be damaged by that huge fall of 30-odd thousand feet. And I had a horrible feeling I might remember her in that state instead of that lovely, vibrant, beautiful girl whom I'd kissed goodbye to at the weekend before. So I didn't want to see her body, but it was important to Jim.
Her face was unrecognisable. And I said to her, well, would you mind if I looked at her feet? They uncovered her feet for me. She'd consulted me once about a mole she had on her big toe. And there, on her big toe, was the mole. So although her face was almost unrecognisable, and her eyes were open, her big toe clinched it.
Ellie Ivel's body was found in a field on the edge of Lockerbie and is finally released to her mother 4 weeks later.
Well, she had just a tiny bruise here, and her mouth was sort of droopy on one side, looked a bit sulky. Otherwise, her face was fine, but covered up to her neck.
American student Ken Bissett was one of 67 victims recovered from the crash site at Park Place. His body was returned to his family in the United States. Kim Wickham had been his flatmate in London.
Ken was wonderful. He was fun, he was funny. He, every night, would make chicken Kiev, which drove me completely insane. But I shared with Ken's mom and dad anything I could remember at the time. He was adopted, and they just loved him, like just adored him. And I mean, He really couldn't have asked for more loving, wonderful parents.
6 weeks after the crash, the search for victims is finally called off. 259 passengers and crew and 11 local residents are confirmed dead. The bodies of 17 of those are never recovered, so a special memorial service is held for them in Lockerbie.
Let us commend to the love and care of our Father all our brothers and sisters who were suddenly taken from us in this disaster.
One of the bodies never found was that of American student Nicole Boulanger. Nicole had been seated in the wing section of the plane that exploded on impact at Sherwood Crescent.
We still kept hoping that her body would be recovered, but as time went on, we had to accept the fact that that was not going to occur. I had requested, however, of the PanAm officials dirt from Sherwood Crescent crater, where it was found that my daughter had died. And of course I knew it wouldn't contain any body parts, but I have it at home in a box, and it is to be buried with me when it is my time.
Those that missed the flight also bear the scars of that day.
I just felt guilt and overwhelmed with, sadness. I was supposed to be on the plane. I feel guilty. You just do, I think. I don't really know what the logic of it is. I don't know that there is a logic to it, but it doesn't really go away.
I can't sleep very well at night. But something is there who give you peace, who give you strength, which is God's name, or God himself. You have to have faith in it.
Christina and her daughter Ellie had tossed a coin to decide who would travel on PanAm 103.
It would have been better if it had been the other way around. The guilt that you sort of imagine yourself rushing her to Heathrow, dragging her out of the queue, don't go. But it's just a life sentence.
In America, every year Syracuse University holds an annual memorial service to honor the 35 students who died in the tragedy. "30 years on, it's the first time Kim Wickham has felt able to attend the annual event in memory of her friends.
I still remember everything like it happened yesterday. I still remember going to see Nicole. I still remember my grandmother calling me and telling me what happened.
Ken Bissett's adoptive parents have since passed away. Ken died before his biological mother, Carol, was able to trace him, but she regularly attends the memorial in Syracuse.
Every time we come here, we hear the names being read. They're just real people in the wrong place at the wrong time.
In England, John Stevenson's sister Anne still has a tape recording of her younger brother and his family.
Are you going to say something to Daddy? Go on. Say hello.
Hello.
Say, this is Hannah speaking.
This is Hannah speaking.
And how old is Hannah?
4.
And how old is Rachel?
5.
No, you're not 5, darling. How old are you? 2.
2.
Say, I am Rachel and I am 2.
Blah, 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 blah.
At least they were all together. That's the one consolation. They were together. They were a family, holding hands in a circle. No widow, widower, orphans. Just one complete family.
"30 years ago, Jim and Jane Swire began work on a memorial to their beloved daughter Flora that has stood the test of time.
I was unable to do almost anything to begin with for the first few weeks, and as it happened by chance, a delivery of trees had been made because we had a plan to start a wood near our house, and it struck me immediately that I wanted a vibrant, living memorial in memory of such a vibrant girl.
I have good memories of her humour and her companionship and her joy, really, the joy she brought us. But it's not the same as having her with us every day. And these trees are new life of a sort, but it's nothing compared with the life and love of a wonderful daughter.